the truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, no facades. On my grind every day, stay. I'm the truth, I'm the truth, I'm the truth. I flex when I step, self-made, that's a bet. In my zone, feeling blessed, not a clone, I'm unique. Counting wins, not the stress, with success on my crest. Heavy crown, but I'm strong, never bound to defeat. Riding clean, watch me gleam, elevate to extreme. 808s, hit the peak, my reflection's what I meet. Rocking jewels, breaking rules, my own path, power leads. I'm the one taking flight, hottest peak in my sight. I'm the truth, no facades, on my grind every day.
The D&A Alpha Pro enters the ring with the confidence of a heavyweight contender. It boasts an ESS and ES9039 MS Pro DAC chip, discrete fully balanced amplification, Bluetooth LDAC support, and a slew of fancy engineering terms that promise better sound, tighter specs, and quote, old school analog soul, whatever that's supposed to mean. At $700, this is marketed as a flagship-grade desktop DAC amp for audiophiles, one that supposedly marries, quote, precision digital architecture with analog warmth and feel. It is sold through Appos Audio and other retailers. Appos loaned me this unit for testing for over 3 weeks. On paper, the Alpha Pro looks like a steal. It's got discrete components, dual toroidal linear power supplies, analog preamp input for turntables, low noise floor measurements, and overkill power output of 6 watts into 32 ohms, and all the buzzwords we've come to expect from high-end DAC marketing. But as we've seen before, especially in the audiophile space, paper means nothing. In practice, I care about one thing. Does this actually perform any better, any differently than the clean, neutral DACs already available for much less money? During my review, I pitted the Alpha Pro against my usual comparison set. The Army 80i2 DAC, the Brooklyn DAC Plus, the Matrix Mini I Pro 3, Sound Blaster X5, and the hifi IDSD. I used a variety of headphones, including the Sennheiser HD800S, meze Empyrean, audeze LCD4Z, Head Audio Headphone, Audio-Technica M60X, Rode NTH100, Bothaus Argon, and several others. I have used all this gear before when comparing DACs and amps costing as little as $100 and as much as several $1,000s. So, let's see if the Alpha Pro is actually the flagship level device D&A claims, or it's just another spec-chasing box with a slick metal shell and an identity crisis. A lot of audio companies try to wow you with their specs. D&A is no exception. Let's look at some of their more eye-catching statements and break them down. For example, they say that this device has old-school analog soul with new-school digital precision, and this is pure nonsense. Analog soul is not a measurable metric, and this kind of phrase is used to give their neutral, distortion-free signal path some kind of mythic aura. Unless D&A is deliberately adding distortion or harmonic coloration, this phrase means nothing. The analog vibe that some audiophiles chase after is really rooted in the idea that your music sounds warmer or more lush or silky, or, these are the types of phrases that audiophiles tend to throw around. Regardless, these are the phrases that people think of when they talk about analog. And a lot of this comes from old school audio components such as turntables and record players and faulty components and, once again, tube amps and tube DACs. Now, tube is a fantastic way of adding that harmonic distortion. It doesn't necessarily need to cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. There are, in fact, devices out there that you can implement into the chain between, let's say, your amp and your DAC that could add those audible harmonic distortion frequencies. And those frequencies could indeed give you the analog flavor you're looking for at a significantly cheaper price than paying for one of these sorts of devices that come out every few months. And on top of that, does not require you to keep buying more and more and more gear. Okay, let's move on. What about the claim that this DAC uses the flagship ES9039 MS Pro? Guys, we are running out of letter and number combinations for these DAC chipsets. At some point, we just have to recognize that there's nothing new being produced here other than just slightly better specifications that will make zero difference. Now, that being said, the ES9039 MS Pro is a solid chip. Technically, ESS's top-tier DAC as of now. We will see next year how this changes. But let's be clear, there is zero audible difference between this and other high-performing ESS chips or AKM chips, for example, like the 9038 or even the 9028, once implemented properly. DAC chips don't have sound signatures. ESS has publicly confirmed this through their measurements, and multiple blind tests have also proven it to be true. What matters is the analog stage, the power supply, and the output impedance, not the chip marketing. And when it comes to analog stage, the RCA out or the headphone out, and the power supply, all these companies are really just using the same components off the shelf. And that's not a bad thing. These analog stage components, these power supplies, they just need to be reliable. They need to produce clean, distortion-free audio. And that's generally what we do in fact get. And if you take a look at the specifications for amps regarding output impedance, you will notice a very consistent trend. The output impedance for the vast majority of headphone amplifiers these days is extremely low. Maybe 1 ohm, maybe slightly less than 1 ohm, maybe around the 2 to 10 ohm mark, depending on the type of amplifier you're looking for. Sometimes when you have a hybrid amplifier that is a solid state with a tube component to it, it could be a slightly higher output impedance of around 10 ohms, but generally they're pretty low. And if you really want to read up on how output impedance can affect what you hear through your headphones, and yes, even your speakers, then you may want to check up NWAV Guy. And this guy's forum is ancient at this point, but he hits on every single major topic that plagues the audiophile community and in clear terms describes what is actually happening. Needless to say, the 9039 MS Pro is a very good technical component. It is not an analog replacement. Then there's the issue of femtosecond oscillators with VCXO second PLL. Oh my goodness, that sounds so inviting. This is impressive on paper. Clock jitter supposedly below 15 picoseconds. But this is audiophile bait. The human ear cannot detect jitter before 100 picoseconds. And most modern DACs, even budget ones, clock in well under this number. This isn't a value add-on. It's just overkill dressed up in science-y language to impress people who don't understand what matters. How about the 6 watts into 32 ohms headphone output? Well, this is pretty absurd. No headphones ever need anything near this level of power. This kind of wattage is just a bragging point for spec sheet warriors. The HD800S needs 20 to 30 milliwatts. Even the headphones rarely need more than 500 milliwatts. Giving you 6 watts is like giving you a sledgehammer to push a thumbtack into a corkboard. It is completely unnecessary and in some cases can be pretty risky. How about the multi-stage linear power supply with ultra low noise? Sure. But so does every other $500 and higher DAC amp worth its salt. This is not a new innovation, it's just table stakes. The thermal zoning for temperature control within plus or minus 2 Celsius. My goodness, that makes it sound like this particular type of component or components is so susceptible to temperature variation. And this is one of the weirdest and most irrelevant pieces of marketing fluff I have seen in quite a while. And I gotta tell you, I've seen a ton of marketing nonsense. Unless you're stacking multiple, and I mean multiple, power-hungry amps or DACs in an unventilated closet, your DAC is not going to suffer thermal instability. This is a solution in search for a problem. How about the Star Quad routing PCB for EMI protection? Again, standard practice and high-frequency circuit design. It's not unique and it's not worth hyping. EMI protection is standard fare, guys. Precision MELF resistors and dual mean-well toroidal transformers. Good components, no doubt, but we're no longer in an age where boutique parts alone make or break a device. If you're asking $700 to pay, I expect premium components. This is not a bonus, it's just a requirement. And quite frankly, unless you are actually providing me with measurements which demonstrate that using these sorts of boutique components makes an actual audible difference, there is no actual audible difference. You're just using a way to artificially inflate the price tag. Now let's turn to physical build. Physically, the Alpha Pro is a very well-built device. The metal chassis is clean and tightly machined. The design is minimalist, almost brutally minimalist, with a matte white finish and a 3D pop logo branding. The front panel has a 4-pin XLR headphone output, a 6.35mm single-ended headphone output, a 4.4mm head balanced output, an input selector, a volume knob, and a few status and decorative LED lights along with the gain selector. The back panel includes RCA analog input, RCA XLR pre-outs, coaxial and optical digital inputs, and USB-C digital input. And there's also an antenna for Bluetooth, LDAC supported, by the way. The antenna is actually a pretty good design. It's a little knob instead of the typical vertical antenna we see from other DACs. This alone is a worthwhile upgrade to Bluetooth implementation. It makes storage and clearance a little bit easier. But what's missing? A screen, a remote, a companion app. We'll come to those things in a little bit. The Alpha Pro is fairly compact, though heavy for its size, likely due to the dual toroidal transformers. No cheap wall-wart power brick here, and that is a plus. It's a good-looking product, but there's only so much you can say for a box of aluminum with some dials on it. There's nothing innovative with the aesthetics. The flashing white LEDs are cyberpunk eye candy. But when will these manufacturers get the picture that a big, bright, useful screen with information that actually matters on DACs is a long overdue feature? Certainly not with DNA. Let's cut to the chase. The Alpha Pro sounds exactly like it should. Neutral, transparent, no coloration, no warmth, no brightness, no softening of transients or enhancement of bass. It is a textbook transparent DAC amp. When volume mashed against the RME 80i2 DAC, the Brooklyn DAC Plus, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, and Sound Blaster X5, there was no audible difference in any test track. I repeated these comparisons with a wide range of headphones over multiple sessions lasting several hours to maybe as short as maybe 20 minutes at a time, and every single result was the same. When volume matched and using the same tracks and going over with an A-B switch, no difference at all. Why? Because DACs don't have a sound. Properly implemented DACs, even inexpensive ones, measure and sound virtually identical under controlled conditions. All the sound in a signal chain comes from the transducer, the headphones or speakers, and the room. If you're wearing headphones, the room is kind of cut out of the equation, obviously. And everything else is negligible or flat-out placebo effect. The ESS chip in this device really does its job. The analog stage seems clean. There's no hiss with IEMs, there's no distortion with planars, plenty of headroom, no surprises, and definitely no magic. It's fascinating that some brands just refuse to provide frequency response graphs for their DACs and amps. It's purposeful omission, which then drives plentiful hype from the normal audiophile circle jerks. And DNA is no exception to this rule. They don't provide any FR graphs. But luckily, ASR did measure this device. And ASR confirmed that the Alpha Pro delivers a perfectly neutral sound signature with distortion and noise pushed well below the threshold of human audibility. In multi-tone tests and frequency response sweeps, the Alpha Pro exhibited no coloration, no treble roll-off, no bass sag, just ruler flat playback. And this lines up with what I heard in my own comparisons before I pulled up ASR's comparison charts. It's a completely transparent DAC amp that sounds identical to other well-measuring gear when volume matched. ASR also verified that the Alpha Pro outputs 4.6 watts into 32 ohms. Less than the marketing claim, but still more than enough to drive any headphone on the market, including inefficient planar magnetics. Even at high loads, it maintains clean delivery without dynamic compression or clipping. That said, ASR noted a flaw in the unit's volume control ramp. They said that the analog pod has a very slow taper at the low end, meaning you get very little adjustment range when listening quietly or using sensitive headphones. It's a common issue with potentiometer-based designs, but one that stands out in a product this expensive. On the other hand, it could also be seen as a positive, meaning that if you just want to make slight adjustments, you have an overly sensitive IEM or headphone, then you do want a volume pot that does taper very, very slowly, and it requires a little bit more before you actually hit the peak volume. That could be a very good way of protecting your ear and your gear. In short, the Alpha Pro is technically excellent. It just isn't amazing. It's nothing new. It's nothing innovative. It's nothing different in sound signature from a vast number of other products that have come in the last 10 years, and I am quite sure are going to come in the next 10 years in the future. I tested the Alpha Pro with some of the most demanding headphones I own, and this is what I found. On the 800S, excellent clarity as expected. Plenty of headroom, again, as expected with this device. Imaging and stage are headphone dependent, not amp specific, but hey, let me tell you this, the 800S sounded great on all my devices, including the Alpha Pro. The Head Audio headphone, again, version 1, is a power-hungry device with no problem on the Alpha Pro on high gain with the volume knob at 12 o'clock. And this is a feature I'm going to have to point out several times starting now. On the Audeze LCD4Z and LCD3, both paired fine with the Alpha Pro. I didn't notice any clipping or audible hiss or distortion, but once again, peak performance seemed to appear on high gain with the volume knob at 12 o'clock. Same thing as on the headphone. I also tried it on the Meze Empyrean, and I had a similar experience here than with the other planar headphones I mentioned. High gain, knob around 12 o'clock is when the Empyrean really started to vibe. Now, that's kind of odd, given that the Empyrean should not be that difficult to drive and is not that difficult to drive. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with this particular DAC amp. Then there was the Audio-Technica M60X and the Rode NTH100, and on both, I got clean, silent noise floor. No hiss, no audible distortion, nothing. Worked great, sounded great on this and the other DAC amps. And then there's the Modhouse Argon. I got the characteristic bass thump at high gain. There was still plenty of headroom left on this particular amp DAC, so I didn't have to worry about having to push or drive the headphone more and more to achieve peak performance because I got it fairly early on, comparatively speaking, but again, only on high gain. So here's the bottom line. The Alpha Pro will drive any headphone you own, easily. But that does not make it special. Power without purpose is just flex. And here, it's mostly for show. When I did A/B tests using passive A/B switch boxes, I heard no audible difference whatsoever between the Alpha Pro and the comparative DACs. When volume matched and under strict repeatable listening conditions, there's no difference. But the positive side is that the Alpha Pro does in fact have plenty of power, which kind of is a good thing and also a bad thing because you don't really need all that power. LDAC pairing worked smoothly. I paired a Pixel 7 Pro and streamed via LDAC. Sound quality was on par with other high-quality Bluetooth receivers. Of course, LDAC is still a lousy, lossy format, and you lose some resolution compared to wired USB, but for background listening or casual use, it's perfectly fine. No complaints here except that you can't check connection bitrate or codec status because there is no display. Oh, wonder if we're missing something. And then there's this one little gripe of mine, the lack of software, which I think is a massive misstep. And this is where the Alpha Pro really stumbles and falls right into the territory along with all the other products that we've already reviewed. There is no companion software, no app, no display, no remote, and that means you cannot customize EQ because there is none here. You can't see what bitrate or codec is being used. You can't check if MQA is active or what sample rate is incoming. You can't rename inputs. You can't save profiles. You can't control it remotely. This puts the Alpha Pro firmly behind competitors like the ADI2 DAC, which now can be found for about $1,000 brand new and much cheaper if you get it used, the Matrix Mini I Pro 3, or even the $400 topping EX5, which you can find for much cheaper used. These and other products offer decent displays, DSP settings, EQ bands, firmware updates, and even preset modes. Hell, even some portable DAC amps have DSP, EQ, and app functionality for under $200. The Alpha Pro at $700 has none of that. This is 2025. Even $300 DACs have companion apps and basic DSP. Here, for $700, you're getting a high-end engine bolted into a car with no dashboard, no seat adjustments, and no climate control. If DNA wants to be taken seriously in this space, they need to realize that software and user interface are not optional extras. And this is not just specific to DNA. How many of these companies do the same thing over and over again, making the same mistakes? Topping, SMSL, and yes, even FIO because they can't get their shit together. And when you're charging $700, it's insulting to pretend that these companies are not taking you for a ride. The DNA Alpha Pro is a classic example of a product that nails the hardware and completely ignores the user. You get a high-end DAC chip, a clean analog stage, plenty of power, a phono input, Bluetooth LDAC, all wrapped up in a nicely machined chassis with premium internal components. But you also get no screen, no remote, no app, no DSP, no EQ, no user interface, no customization, and no justification for the $700 asking price beyond, hey, look, we use nice parts. That is not good enough anymore. Everybody uses nice parts. If you only care about clean sound and powerful output, the Alpha Pro will not disappoint you. But if you want any modern features, or if you're tired of knob twisting guesswork every time you switch inputs, it's going to frustrate you fast. In 2025, a flagship DAC amp should be more than just a pretty signal path. It should be a full experience. And on that front, the Alpha Pro fails. Yes, it sounds great because it's neutral and clean and powerful, and it sounds as fantastic as the vast majority of other modern components that use good componentry and good build quality, including those which are substantially cheaper than this $700 product. And yes, the build and aesthetics here look pretty good. In fact, it's a pleasing looking device that has a very different aesthetic than almost anything else on the market currently. But those flashing lights can only take you so far, and unless you are really into cyberpunk, it doesn't mean a hell of a lot. It's missing a core set of necessary features for 2025 going to 2026. We just cannot let these companies continue to take us for a ride on this. As far as value is concerned, look, you can find products that sound exactly the same, give you plentiful power output, and cost substantially less than the Alpha Pro. So when you think of it that way, you're not getting value unless your entire value assessment is thrown into the aesthetics and, well, newer is better mentality. Overall, I don't see the justification for $700 for this device. And I just want to point out, when things are getting more expensive all the time, especially because of varying political climates, it doesn't make sense to pay $700 for a device that does what cheaper devices already do. And some of those devices have more features than what this one does.